Hi, Data Ben here. Today we're going to cover the let function, which is a new function in Microsoft 365, which is currently on the beta channel but will soon be available for all users. So what is the let function? The let function is a useful way to programmatically create a formula in Excel. So if you have some experience from the previous videos in VBA, the let function will be very easy for you to pick up. So the syntax is let, a name and a name value, so a name and value pair. This is similar to declaring in VBA, declaring a x as an integer, for example. And then finally, the last argument is always a calculation. So you can actually have multiple name and name value pairs. Let's have a look at this. In this scenario, we have a table of sales from an online auction site. So we have a list of products, the date it was sold, the cost of that product to us, and then the sales price on the auction site. And what we want to do is to be able to choose a specific product and then have the results appear in this table here. So for the number of items sold, the minimum profit on an item, the maximum profit from the items, the average profit, and the total profit from the items. So we're going to start with items sold to demonstrate the first let example. So we start with equals let, open parenthesis, and you want to expand your formula window so you have more space to work with using the up and down arrow on the right hand side. So click it once to expand the formula. Then press Alt and Enter, and we're going to first define the product. So we'll call it product, and then we'll choose it, which is going to be the option here. And then we're going to function F4 to lock this into place, and then another comma. So this is the first value, key value pair. So we have the name and the value. And next we want a date range. So we'll do date range, and this is going to be an array. And we can actually choose the dates from this table. So Control Shift down or Command Shift down, and I've called this table sales. So you could actually just type this in as well. So sales, open square brackets, and you can choose from the list of columns, and I've chosen date here. So we have a date range through here, and then Alt and Enter. As the last argument, you can have anything as the result here, so what you want the calculation to be. But as you're building a formula, as we're doing here, it's good to test it as we're going along. So we only have two things. We have the product and the date range here. Let's first see the result of product by just putting product and then return. And you see it's coming up with what we have here. So if I change this, it will change in the cell as well. So let me just move this out of the way as we do the next one. So we will say, okay, we want to see if we've got date range in here as well, which we do. It's a spillover, and all of these numbers represent these dates here. So we can test the results of values as we go along. So for example, one final example, if I just put some text in here, so I'll just call this item, or in fact, I'll call this hello world, and then hello world as the text, and then as the calculation I put the hello world parameter after the comma after hello world. It will actually just print out that result. So you can see here, similar to VBA, we're starting to declare our variables, essentially our name and value pairs. So product, date range, and then the calculation at the end. Okay, let's solve the problem of counting the number of items sold for the Rubik's Cube in the month January 2020. So we've done some testing here, but we're just going to remove some of the test data, including the date range, because now we're going to have the date from parameter, which we'll set to the January 2020. So underneath this is actually the 1st of the 1st 2020. And we'll lock the row as well, so we can copy and paste this formula later. Alt plus Enter, and then we'll do the date to range, which will use the end of month formula, so year month, and the start date, which we can now actually, instead of you choosing J3, we can use the parameter we've already declared. So we can say the date from, and the number of months we're not going to move, so it will just get the last day in the month, so for the date to. And then we want the actual product range as well. So as we're building this, I'll expand the window down further. So we want product range, and we'll refer to the sales table. So I'll type sales, open square bracket, and choose product here. And now we have the product range in too. So again, I can just test, maybe I want to see what the date to is here. So I've just put date to in the calculation as the last argument. So I'll format this result as a date by pressing Ctrl and 1 and date. And you can see it's come up with the correct result there. So if I do date from in the calculation, it will show the first and so on. So it's always remember that the last argument in the let function is the calculation, and you can do intermediate calculations as you're going along just to check that you're on the right track. We also need the date range, so all of the dates in which to filter the data. So again, we'll call this date range sales, and we'll use the date column, and we have that in memory now as well. And then it's on to the actual filtered data. So we'll say filtered range. So this is where we want to filter based on the Rubik's Cube option and January 2020. So we'll actually use the filter function and open brackets, and we want to filter on the product. So we'll say sales product, or as you can see, we've already defined sales product, so we can actually use the previously defined product range. So if you find you repeat anything through the formula, always look above to see if you've defined it already and use the defined name instead, because it's much easier to read and easier to track in longer let formulas. So we're filtering on the product range, and then we're filtering again on, so what we're going to include is the product range equals product. And now we're going to use the AND function, which is a multiplication function in Excel. So whenever you're filtering on multiple items, you use the multiplier function, and this essentially means AND. So we're saying the product range equals product, which is Rubik's Cube, and then we're saying the date range is greater than or equal to the date from, close brackets, and the date range is less than or equal to the date to function, the date to parameter, and then close brackets on the filter, and then a comma after the filtered range formula. And now we want to see whether we get the correct results themselves. So we actually want to output the filtered range, and you'll see that it spills through here. So there's actually 3 items, and then if we change this option, we can see we have 2 items, 3 items, 2 items, and so on as we click through the different options. And finally, we just want to count these. So we'll just use the count A function as the final calculation, and we should receive the number 3, which it's currently formatted as a date. So we can just change this back to general, and we can see we have the number 3 here. And then we want to see if this works by copying and pasting across to the rest of the table, which it does. So we have the number of items sold here, and if you change the options, you'll see that this changes dynamically to match the number of items sold in the table. So to summarize this final formula, we've used a number of key value pairs. So product, which contains the option in G3, date from, which is on the top of the table there, so January 2020, date to, which is the end of the month, the product range from the table, the date range from the table, and then we've actually created a filtered range using the filter function by saying that the filter matches the product and is greater than or equal to the date from and less than or equal to the date to. And then the final line, we've done our calculation. I quite like to add a space here, so an extra carriage return, just to clarify that this final line is indeed the calculation and that we're defining the parameters on these first few lines here. Next, we'll be looking at combining the powers of let and the new lambda function together to create custom functions in Excel, a fantastic new way to automate your formulas.